Hi everyone! Today I have a really big Pokemon. This is what I have so far. So if you haven't recognized her yet, this will be a Milotic and she's pretty long. I think... So it takes up one arm's length and then my torso, and then I have another arm that it doesn't go yet. But I will attach some fins to her tail, so she'll be a little bit longer. I used Loops and Threads Sweet Snuggles Light and a 5.5mm hook. I used yarn under instead of yarn over. I think I figured out that I like yarn over for amigurumi with chenille yarn or blanket yarn, but for acrylic yarn I like using yarn under because it makes the stitches look so square and neat. I noticed though that for chenille yarn it kind of makes the stitches too bulky, or that might just be also due to the fact that my tension is pretty tight so that there aren't any holes in the stitching and I use a small hook. But either way, it makes the stitches kind of bulky, and so I prefer the look of yarn over for chenille yarn for my tension. But I did this one with yarn under and I think the stitches don't look weird at all and they do look pretty neat. I'm not sure why that is, but yes. I do have tail fins I already made. There's 4 of them and they'll attach kind of like this to the tail. Now I have to make the scales to go on her tail body, and then I need to make the little hair fins that go on her head, then just finishing touches. So let's get her done! I'm gonna make 2 scales in blue to start, so here's my blue. These pattern instructions are a little unclear for which part you need to repeat, but I think as long as you count how many stitches there should be at the end and make sure it's the same as what it says in the pattern, you'll be fine if you want to try this pattern out. I wish it was slightly more clear with the parentheses, like what part you need a repeat of the pattern. And I missed the stitch count somewhere, how nice. One, two. 1, 2, 3, 4. Am I missing something? I'm really confused, but instead I'm missing something, or I'm just stupid. I think the instructions might be wrong somewhere, or the stitch count is off. Wait, no. I think this row needs to be repeated, so I'll leave a note. That's just on my own copy of the pattern. Okay, I see. I should have looked further in the pattern because you know how most patterns start with increases, then you have single crochet rows, then you go into decreases. If I had just looked ahead a few rows in the pattern, I would have seen the decrease and the increase didn't match. So I'm just going to change that one row to match them, and I think that was just a typo in the pattern. So I'm still going to finish it first and make sure it looks alright, but then after that I'll let you know, and I'll also put in the description box which row that I think has the typo, and if you do try out this pattern you can refer to that. So that's the scale. I'm not sure how much of a tail I need. I'll just leave twice the circumference, which is what I usually like to do. And that is 1 blue scale done. I just need to make 1 more blue scale and then 3 pink ones. I'm starting with a new color now. I haven't used this pink yet. I like to write down which color I used in case I want to make it again in the future. I'm going to save this tag for now. I'm too lazy to do this right when I need it, so I collect my yarn tags and then input them into a Google spreadsheet all at once in a while. So yeah, I like to note down the yarn brand, the name, the color, the weight size, the size hook that's recommended, what size hook I used, the washing instructions, basically everything important on this yarn tag. I like to write it down for future reference. I also like to weigh my yarn. 256 grams. It's normally 250 and mine was 256, so I'll write that on here. I'll also weigh the yarn when I'm done with it so I know how many grams went into my project. Maybe I should have stuffed Melodic a bit less so it could lay around my neck like this, but as it is, I kind of stuffed her a lot on purpose so she can be firm, so she doesn't really curve that much. Maybe next time though, I'll make one that's understuffed so I can shape her around my neck. And I need 3 of these in pink. Yay! Oh, there's a lot of fuzz. No! I finished my scales, and like I said, the pattern doesn't have very many pictures. There's pretty much no in-progress pictures, there's only the final result pictures, so I'm going to have to figure out what the sentence means for the assembly. Hopefully it'll turn out okay. There's not a very super clear picture of the tail. I wish there was. I think I know what it wants. Definitely going to change it up a little bit. Okay, I think I like it like that. Sewing time, I guess. And also time to hope that my chenille yarn doesn't shed or fuzz. You know, if you've ever used chenille yarn before and tried to sew pieces on, then you've probably ran into this problem before. There's like 3 things that annoy me the most. The first is that the tail end keeps shedding piece by piece. The second thing that bothers me is that the part where you have your needle right here starts, like the chenille falls off there too. So that's usually where the issue starts. I've noticed if I've used like a plastic needle, then it's much better, but this is always the needle that I have in my hand, so it ends up that I just keep using this metal one. But if you do have one of those blue plastic needles, I've noticed that that works much better for me for chenille yarn. There's also the option of using a different yarn like acrylic or cotton to sew on your pieces. That wouldn't apply as much for this kind of thing because I'm sewing it onto the surface, but that is an option if you really hate the chenille fuzzing on you while you sew. I don't know if you can see, but right here I already have like a jagged mark impression left from the needle, and I might start getting issues there, but I'm almost done sewing this scale on, so hopefully it can hold out a little longer. I got a lot of progress done on my melodic, and I have to say the tail was the most consuming part. I honestly didn't think it would take that long, but here it is. So this is the tail. I attached scales, and then I also attached the black that surrounds the scales to split them up into scales. That was convoluted. I kind of just didn't pin anything down. I didn't even plan anything out. I just put one end down and started sewing it, and it turned out alright in the end. So here's the scales. The ones that are attached kind of stuck out a bit. There was some like space trapped in there when I sewed it on, so I had to go back with another strand of yarn and kind of try to sew them down, which that was pulling chenille yarn through 4 layers of stitches at once with the flimsy needle, and that actually put a lot of pressure on my wrist because I wasn't being careful. I felt the strain, but I finished the tail anyways, which I shouldn't have done, but next time I'll be more careful. Some things I did to ensure that I had a smooth chenille sewing experience was I left a long tail at the start of the chains and also at the end of the chains. Normally you would use the tail from the end of the chains to sew it on, so I did that, and then I also used the tail from the start of the chains and kind of met them in the middle. That way if one of them fuzzed early, there was still the other one as backup. That worked really well. I also sewed it really slowly and I took my time. Also made sure to pull the yarn in one direction instead of like pulling it in the direction that's most convenient for me, and that was probably the most effective part. So yeah, here's the tail. I already crocheted the hair pieces or so. I'm not sure what to call them. They go here, and I learned something interesting. So the difference between a male and a female melodic is the length of these hairs. The male melodic hair is probably like this length, while the female melodic have them this length. Yeah, that's the difference between a male and female melodic. There's probably other differences that might be written in the Pokédex, but this hairpiece is the most relevant one when crocheting, and mine will be a female melodic. I just need to attach these to the face details, and then I need to attach the tails on the end, or the fins onto the tail, and I need to make the 2 antennae, and I think that will be it for her, and she'll be finished hopefully today, maybe tomorrow. Hey guys, I went ahead and made the rest of the pieces for melodic, and here they are. So what's next is to make the eyes. Cutting the eyes out of felt will probably be another of the more difficult parts because the shape needs to be pretty good, otherwise it can make or break how melodic will look. So I'm going to pull up some reference photos of Melodic's eyes and do my best to cut out a shape that I like. So it looks like the eyes will take up a big part of her face. Maybe I should use paper first, but I don't feel like these eyes are that difficult. The issue is that the eye shape and the antenna on Milotic go hand in hand. So I kind of have to hold the antenna into place and the eye shape I want at the same time. I actually have sticks that can help me hold the antenna into place, which will probably make this a lot easier. I think this looks like a pretty good spot for the antenna to go, like this. And then the eye will kind of make a diamond shape underneath it, like this, and or not diamond. What? Not diamond. Half moon or half sphere. It's kind of hard to tell if I like it or not because it's all red. It kind of makes Milotic look evil. This is a good size, but I thought it would look better with the black, but it still looks kind of weird without the white. So maybe I'll cut out the white circle first and then go back and fix the black and red if I want to. Okay, I got my white circle. I like it. And now I'm just gonna hold the hair on top and see if I like where everything is positioned. Right here. This is hard because I'm not holding the eye down, it's just standing there by itself, so I have to be careful of that. Hair goes like this, so I'll just shift it like one row for Milotic. I'm stabbing her face all over. Okay, I have 2 sets of eyes now, and I'm going to put the craft wire in the antenna. I've done craft wire in side crochet before. One of the biggest things you have to be sure of is that the sharp end won't poke through one of the stitches, and this is especially more important when you're using chenille. I've made a Mew out of blanket yarn, which is thick, so it's easier for the wire to get through the holes. And the tail held up pretty well, but I definitely didn't put enough wire, so the tail was still floppy. I think you need to put rounds and rounds and rounds of craft wire for blanket or chenille yarn compared to acrylic yarn. So that was my first attempt with craft wire. My second attempt was when I made a Chansey. Maybe you can tell I'm a bit of a Pokemon fan, but for the hairs on Chansey's head, the 6 of them, I put craft wire in there, and this time I doubled up the wire enough that it held the chenille up, but I had some issues with the wire poking through the stitches, so this time I'll be really sure to make sure that the end can't poke through and that it's also doubled up enough so that it will hold the shape of the antenna. So here's my antenna, so we'll go all the way through, and then okay, let me see how well it holds up to this much wire. Since chenille is lighter than blanket yarn, I think this will be enough. Yes, I think this is a perfect amount. So here's my washi tape. Just secure it over the ends. I want to sew my eyes on because I feel that's the most secure, and in the past when I've tried to sew eyes on, it's always looked kind of terrible if the stitches aren't perfectly straight and you can see the thread, or if I was trying to sew it onto especially blanket yarn but also chenille, because on cotton or acrylic yarn you can easily put the needle through a stitch, but in blanket and chenille yarn the stitches that you go through are usually much bigger, so you can't exactly go into just any convenient stitch, and also they're fuzzy, so the yarn is made with like a string and then there's fuzz attached, so a lot of times you miss it, so it's kind of difficult for me to sew on blanket and chenille yarn. I'm sure it just takes a lot of practice, but I'm going to attempt it again for Milotic, and let's hope that I don't completely ruin the felt. I think I like it like this. I think I will double up on my thread for this one because this thread is really thin. Okay, Okay, so I finished sewing the black onto the red, and I have to say I went really slowly and made the stitching look even and neat, and it actually looks great. I think my issue with stitching in the past is that it's just too visible on my white felt, and I think I figured out the reason for that. The black thread blends in pretty well in the black felt, but on the white felt, the white thread is a little too bright and the felt is kind of opaque. I think it's just the felt that I use is too thin. I don't even know what brand the felt is. It's just whatever felt I can find at the craft store, but I know sometimes they sell felt that's like thicker and they call it premium felt or something similar. Luckily, I actually have both, so I can show you, but this one is thicker and more stiff, and this one is more drapey and it's thinner. I can kind of see the light through this one, but I can't really see the light as well through this one. And I think if I use this felt from now on, the thread won't show as much and make big holes on the white felt. It will probably make me like stitching more, but as it is now, the white thread shows up too much on the thin felt that I have. I think that's one of the big reasons that I've never liked stitching on it, because usually when you make eyes you use white felt, and so I would start with the white and it just looked awful, so I would give up and then go to needle felting or just gluing the part on. But I didn't want to felt for this project. I think sewing looks good. And for this one, I want to do that stitch where it looks like regular sewing, but there's a line on the edge. So like if the stitches are going this way, there's a line on each edge. It's been so long since I've sewed anything though, I can't remember which way you need to pull the thread, so I'm gonna try to look it up. And I don't know what it's called, so I'm just gonna search blanket stitch on edge of fabric, and lucky me, it looks like that's actually what it's called, blanket stitch. So you want to go from the back to the front. This is quite awkward, and I almost feel as if it would have been easier to assemble the head and then attach it to the body. But it is what it is, and I'll work with what I've got. Guys, I finished sewing Felt Eyes onto Milotic and I'm in love. I think it turned out really well, all things considered. I did finally figure out what works for me and it went really smoothly. Obviously, I'll need to practice a lot more from now on in order to actually nail it down, but I'm really satisfied with how it turned out compared to past attempts. And so now it's time to sew on the antennae. So I'm going to finish assembling her and I'll see you back when I'm done with that. You know, I'm in the middle of still attaching things to Milotic's head, but one of my tails kind of comes out at the cheek and I thought it kind of looked like a long whisker for like a dragon or something. That's kind of cool. Maybe this would be the inspiration for something. Obviously it wouldn't be completely melodic, but like I think the head pieces and the eyes are really nice for a dragon too, especially with this funny whisker. I think melodic is technically like a sea serpent or something like that, but I'm actually not sure. I should probably go look that up. And she's finished! Let me just untangle the hair pieces. She actually has a lot of fuzz, so I want to get rid of some of the fuzz. Guys, she's gorgeous! So here are the horns, sort of heart-shaped, and they can be molded to the shape they need to be. And the hair pieces, which are about 5 inches longer than that of a male melodic, so she's female. And the eyes were sewn on with felt, which I think was pretty good success considering that this is the first big thing that I sewed on, I suppose. And here's her curved body, the scaly tail, and the black chenille that I had to sew the whole line on. I wonder if surface slip stitching might work next time, but I also kind of like the chains and then just sewing them on, even though it's a really big pain, because they stick out more and makes it look 3D. And here's the fantail. So overall, I think she's about 4 feet tall. So pretty. This is my biggest Pokemon yet, I would say. I do have a Mew and a Sylveon that I made, pretty big ones, but this one is longer and I would say more intricate, I guess. So I'm really happy with how she turned out. If I can get her around my neck. Sort of. She's not very bendy. You're so cute. Well, that's it for my melodic journey, guys. I'm a little sad that I wasn't able to get any footage of when I started her because it would have been really cool to just see the whole progress, I think. But at least I was able to catch the middle to the end, and I think the end result is so worth it. If you are a Pokemon lover, if you love melodic, I definitely suggest this. The pattern is a little bit confusing, but you can figure it out. And if you have any questions, I didn't personally try reaching out to the designer, but if it's something simple, feel free to reach out to me also, and I can let you know how I did that part.